joining us for another student loan help clinic and workshop. We are so pumped today to talk about something that like literally hundreds or thousands of people have reached out to us about, which is public service loan forgiveness. And that's obviously what brings you all here today as well. So we're going to get started in just a few minutes. I'm going to give folks some time to trickle in. I see there's already 500 people joining us. So I'm going to just give it a few more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, while we let folks join us, I just want to do a quick round of housekeeping so that you all know what to expect and how today's workshop is going to work. So first off, we want to answer as many questions as possible, but with 500, 600, 700 people with us, it can get a bit overwhelming. So we ask folks, put your questions in the chat box, which is on the side of your screen. Those go to us here at Student Debt Crisis Center and at Savvy, and then we will either talk about them out loud, or we have Orlando, Sabrina, and Ian and Lindsay with me today who will be answering questions in the chat. We do ask, the questions that are more broad about a repayment program, things like that are questions we can answer today. If you have a very specific question about your scenario that's a bit technical, we may not be able to answer it today. And you may be best helped either offline or through the Savvy tool, which we're going to talk about later. And last but not least, there is a live transcript that I'm turning on right now. So for those that have accessibility issues or, maybe you got to turn the audio off, definitely feel free to use the transcript feature here. And one more bit, we will be recording today's workshop and also posting it on YouTube. So I know a lot of people are going to ask me, I have to jump off early. Will you have a recording? The answer is yes, and you will get a copy of that for future use. All right, let's head on over to the next slide here and get started with the workshop. All right, so let's first introduce ourselves so you all know, where we're coming from here. I'm Cody Hunanian. I am the executive director here at the Student Debt Crisis Center. I have two members of our team, Orlando Caballo and Sabrina Calazans, who are part of our outreach team. They're going to be here to help answer questions. Many of you are joining us because you already follow Student Debt Crisis Center. But just as a reminder, we are a nonprofit and we echo the voices of student loan borrowers, and we work with partners to change public policy and work on ending the student debt crisis. And core to our mission is education and outreach work just like this so we can help people like you. I also have Lindsay Clark and Ian Kuhn from Savvy. Lindsay, Ian, are you with us here today?
We are. Thanks, Cody. And it's great to be with you all for another one of our sort of famous student loan help sessions, this one focused on Pslf, but we're excited to be here. I'm again joined by Ian Kuhn, who's going to be a little bit later on in the presentation talking about the absolutely free tool that we provide to the SDCC community of borrowers that hopefully can be a valuable and powerful resource for all of you in crossing the finish line around public service loan forgiveness. So we're excited to talk more about the program and get started.
Absolutely. And we bring Savvy here today, as a trusted partner of ours. Again, they're going to talk about a tool that's absolutely free to SDCC supporters. And we brought them because the information we're going to share today, it's incredibly helpful. It's incredibly important, and yet it's a lot of information. And sometimes we know you want a tool or some extra help getting through the process. And you'll see later how our friends here can really help. Before we get started, I also just want to check off a few, details I feel like we have to share before we do these workshops. Today we're going to talk about student loan basics. We're going to share some policy updates. We're going to talk about repayment plans. And this particular workshop is going to focus on student loan forgiveness through the public service loan forgiveness program. Again, at the end, we're going to share an online tool and we'll help you understand your options to enroll in these programs. But as an important detail, again, I'm going to just say we are not financial counselors or attorneys. So there are some issues or situations borrowers face where they will need some other expert opinion that we're not qualified for. And we'll always be honest about that. Great. Next slide, please. So today's agenda, we're going to go over important updates. There's a lot happening in the space around student loan policies and COVID pandemic era relief. We're going to talk about the basics so you understand your loans. We're going to talk about federal loan forgiveness, repayment plans, and again, we're going to cover that savvy tool at the end, so stay with us. So let's just start with updates. I know a lot of folks that are on today's workshop are probably tracking their student loan situation pretty closely, and it's these important updates that have happened recently that are kind of top of mind. So we're going to start with COVID-19 relief updates. I'll share some other changes in the space that are happening, that have been happening throughout the Biden administration, and I'll share some information about other updates that are important. So let's get started here on the next slide. So COVID-19 relief for borrowers. Most people who have a federal student loan have had their payments suspended and interest waived since March of last year, and that is going to continue until March of 2020, and it's going to continue, at least for now, until August 31st of 2022. If you have federal student loans and your payments have not been on pause, that likely means you have a type of federal student loan that does not qualify, either an older federal family education loan or what is called a Perkins loan. We'll get into those details shortly. Also, unfortunately, private student loans from banks have never qualified for this type of relief. So there's a whole slew of borrowers who have never received relief at all. The payment pause period does count towards public service loan forgiveness and other time-sensitive programs. So we'll get into that shortly. And still, during this period of payment pause, you've been able to recertify your income for income-driven repayment plans, despite payments being on pause. So we'll talk about it in a few minutes, how borrowers have been able to really make their situation as affordable as possible based on changes in their employment or hours that happened during the pandemic. Next slide, please. Now, beyond borrowers in repayment, there are tons of folks who have fallen behind to the point that they're in student loan default. And the COVID-19 relief is designed to help them as well. So there have been a pause on withholding of tax and Social Security refunds for federally held student loans. In the past, if you fell behind on your student loans, you could have your taxes or interest your tax or Social Security payments withheld by the federal government. That has not been happening during this relief. Also, borrowers who are having wage garnishments should not be having their wages garnished. Employers were instructed to halt that type of wage garnishment. And lastly, you've probably noticed if you're in default, collection activities have really slowed down. Really, they should be on pause. So you shouldn't be getting calls or harassing emails and letters from debt collectors if you've fallen behind during the pandemic. Next slide, please. All right. Now let's talk about who receives COVID-19 relief. So federal direct loans and other, quote, federally held loans are eligible. Now, when I say federally held loan, that means it's a loan that the Department of Education owns. There are other types of federal student loans that are commercially held, meaning that a bank holds the actual ownership of the debt, and that are called commercially held FFEL loans. Those were excluded from COVID-19 relief. So if you haven't received any of this pandemic relief, it's probably because you have one of these loans. Also, again, private loans are not eligible. So update number one, this is where these new updates are coming in. Update number one is that student loan servicers are changing. There are 3 federal student loan servicers, one called Navient, one called FedLoan or FIA, and one called Granite State, that announced that they are no longer going to be servicing federal student loans. That means that collectively, over 16 million people, 1 in 4, roughly 1 in 4 borrowers, are going to have a new student loan servicer in the near future. What that also means is, historically, in the process of changing servicers, student loan borrowers have noticed that there are often paperwork issues, there's confusion, there's a lack of ability to contact the right people. So this can create a quite large disruption for student loan borrowers across the country. And for this workshop, what's important for you is that FedLoan Servicing, the one company responsible for public service loan forgiveness, is going to be changing, which means people who are interested in PSLF will now be working with a company called Mohila. That transition is started in July this month, obviously, and is still ongoing. So, be patient. You're going to be seeing some changes happening to your account either right now or in the coming weeks. The second update is changes to income-driven repayment plans. An income-driven repayment plan we're going to talk about in more detail shortly, but that's an affordable federal repayment plan that bases your monthly payment based on your income instead of the total amount of loan debt that you owe, and that can be a huge benefit. The problem is that for years, student loan servicing companies pushed people into less beneficial programs like forbearance or deferment. And what that did was prevented people from making progress in these programs, because at the end of the program, your loans can be forgiven. So the Department of Education has announced that they're going to be doing a review of people's accounts. And if you have been steered into forbearance for a long period of time, you are going to see that the Department of Education is going to count that time towards completion of an income-driven repayment program. So that will mean that many more people are going to be eligible for loan forgiveness through the completion of an income-driven repayment plan. Also, this means that many people are going to get extra credit towards public service loan forgiveness. So you can see there on the last tab here, 40,000 borrowers are going to immediately see their debt canceled because they had progress in public service loan forgiveness, and the progress made that didn't count previously because of a forbearance will now count towards these programs. This announcement has not been enacted yet. It's just been announced. So again, stay with us, because in the fall, these updates are going to be happening and you'll see them in your account. Okay, update number 3 is the Pslf waiver, and that's what we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about. So what is the Pslf waiver? The Pslf waiver is a announcement to expand the public service loan forgiveness, which means that people who, should have qualified but didn't because of small technicalities are now going to have progress count towards student loans, towards student loan forgiveness. And so regardless of the loan program or repayment plan you were in, you now qualify for public service loan forgiveness. The only problem is that this update is temporary, and we're going to get into the details shortly. But this program is only available under these expanded rules until October of this year. And so that is why we're hosting these workshops. We feel it's incredibly important to get folks enrolled right now while they're eligible for this waiver. So if you've been denied previously because of a Pslf error, you may now qualify under these new rules. And it's really important that you learn about it and apply in time to qualify. And lastly, there are going to be, many of you are going to have automatic credit applied towards your Pslf credits, the 120 monthly credits, which we'll get into shortly. So again, this is a program that's happening as we speak. People are seeing their accounts automatically get updated, but for some of you, there may be some actions you need to take. So that's what we're going to dive into later in this workshop.
Hey, Cody, can I pause you right there just before you continue on
Yeah.
this next one? So just wanted to let everyone know we're experiencing some technical difficulties with the chat right now. And unfortunately, we're the whole team on here that's been poised and ready to answer your questions. We're not able to respond back to borrowers in the chat. So we're trying to figure out what's going on. But in the meantime, just wanted to let everyone know who has been submitting questions and posting messages. The reason why you're not hearing anything back from us is because of a technical issue. So that being said, I encourage you all to continue to post any questions or messages that you have, and that will allow us to see them. And we're going to select a couple, periodically to answer out loud for the group. But otherwise, we'll after the webinar is over, we'll make sure to provide everyone with an email address or contact email that they can perhaps send those questions to if they don't get answered on today's session, and we can follow up that way. So just wanted to let you all.
Lindsay, that you're good to go now. Chat is fully
great.
functional,
Okay.
so
All right. Well, then, never mind. Never mind.
Thank you. Thank you.
No worries.
That's critically important because that's what we're here for, is to answer those questions. So
awesome. Yeah.
We are good to go on that front. Thank you so much for that.
No worries. All right. Continue on, Cody.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, great. So let's head on over to another update. Again, there's so many changes right now. It's like shocking how much has happened in our space over the last few years, or excuse me, few months. Another update is the targeted debt cancellation. So you're probably hearing a ton about student loan cancellation, either the kind that hasn't happened yet or the kind that is happening. And so targeted debt cancellation is happening as we speak. The Department of Education's already discharged almost $6 billion in student debt for people who attended Corinthian colleges. That's a predatory for-profit college. They've canceled about $6 billion in student debt for hundreds of thousands of borrowers from ITT Tech, the Arts Institute, Westwood College. And there's been automatic debt cancellation for borrowers who have had total and permanent disability. And that was made through a small fix to the data relationship between the Department of Education and Social Security. I bring this up only to say there are opportunities to have your student debt canceled if you fit, very specific requirements, and also gives us great hope that some broad relief is on the horizon. That is something we are going to continue to fight for. All right, so those are the updates. It's a lot of changes. Stay tuned because things are literally changing every week and every month, and that's where we come in to continue to do that work and keep you all updated. So understanding your loans. Before we can really get into public service loan forgiveness today, I just want you all to know some pretty basic information about your loans so that you can take that information and go from there. So let's start with student loan basics. What types of loans exist? That really determines what type of options you have available to you. So for example, we have federal student loans. Federal student loans are going to be the types of loans that qualify for the programs we're talking about today. Those are loans that are issued directly from the government or are part of a federal program. You'll know you have a federal student loan because you can find the details at studentaid.gov. That's a database of all of the government's federal student loans. Federal student loans also have some benefits. They have fixed interest rates. They have affordable repayment plans. There's options for you if you fall behind on your loan. There's loan forgiveness program, and there's even default options. For private student loan borrowers, unfortunately, the options available to you aren't as clear cut. And so we're not going to cover much of the choices that are available to you on today's workshop. You'll know you have a private student loan because your information will not be at the studentaid.gov database. Instead, you can find your private student loans on a credit report, or you can contact your lender. Private loans have worse consumer protections for the most part. They have variable interest rates, no repayment plans guaranteed, no options for you if you fall behind on your student loans. And if you get into default, there's often little options you have other than to, kind of negotiate or face your private student lender. And that can be really daunting. So we really emphasize the importance of accessing federal student loans if you have to take out student loans. And you'll see throughout today's workshop all the great options that can be available to you that can help if you fall behind. So let's get into the types of federal student loans. So we kind of already put aside private loans. Now let's get into just federal loans and the different types there. So next slide will show you the difference of direct loans, Perkins loans, and federal family education loans. So if we can go to the next slide here. First, again, studentaid.gov is where you can find all of this information. And you can go there and you can see, does my loan say direct loan? Does it say federal family education loan? Does it say a Perkins loan? All of that information is held in a pretty relatively simple kind of database. If you haven't signed into studentaid.gov, you can always go back and kind of reset up your account. I hadn't logged in for years and I was able to get it. Now, there are federal student loan servicing companies that'll help you understand your federal student loans. Mohila, Nelnet, Navient, who's now going to be transitioning out of federal student loans, and Great Lakes. And some of these names on the private servicer side are those that you may be familiar with if you have a private loan: Wells Fargo, Sallie Mae, SoFi, Discover. But most of you are probably familiar with those on the left-hand side here, the federal student loan servicing companies. So if you want to find your federal student loan, you go to studentaid.gov. Again, you could speak with your student loan servicing company, and you can also find all this information in the federal database, which is at studentaid.gov. Private student loans. Again, you cannot find your private student loan information at studentaid.gov. It's not housed there. None of the information is at the federal government. So you could see if there's a cosigner, which is often a sign that you have a private student loan. You could check your credit report, which will tell you who your lender is. Mine says Department of Education because I have federal student loans. And also you can contact your lender, your servicer, or debt collector, and they should tell you the details you need. So just a quick primer, just to go over some of the things we talked about. What do you do if your servicer changes? If your student loan servicer changes, you can update your contact information. That way you're alerted and you get up-to-date information about who your student loan servicer is in the process that you're experiencing. You should open your mail and email from your new student loan servicer. One of the biggest problems we hear from student loan borrowers is that they contact or that they get a new student loan servicer and they feel like they never hear from them. But what's really going on there is that the servicer is sending them letters and emails, and they don't recognize the company and never open it or know about their new servicer. Save copies of your payment history. Again, there can be a lot of problems when it comes to transferring information from your student loan servicing companies. The best way to do that is to download, an Excel spreadsheet, take screenshots, whatever you can to document your payment history with your previous student loan servicer. And set a reminder. It's helpful to know, hey, I'm going to have a new servicer starting in the next month. I'm going to set a reminder to log in, set up my account, make sure that I have everything I need to kind of pick up where I left off. All right, so that's all the basics, just some standard information that we need to just set the foundation here. I'm going to pass it off to Lindsay, who's going to talk about the federal student loan forgiveness programs. That's kind of what we're all here for, and we'll get into public service loan forgiveness. So Lindsay, definitely jump in.
Awesome. Thank you, Cody. And I know, I see a lot of questions coming in through the chat, and we're going to try our best to answer, what we can. But I think hopefully a lot of the questions, at least that I've seen, are going to be answered in the next couple of minutes through this section. So I would say for those of you who had questions pertaining to public service loan forgiveness, credits, things like that, listen up, because I hopefully will be able to answer many of those right here and now. So we're going to sort of discuss in this section public service loan forgiveness, the big forgiveness program out there. And we're also going to touch on a few other sort of forgiveness and discharge programs that are available to borrowers. But really, we're going to focus on going through the application process, helping you to understand the eligibility requirements and exactly what you need to do in order to determine if you are eligible and how to take advantage of this program. So let's talk about public service loan forgiveness, or PSLF. So this program started in October of 2007, okay, meaning any employment or payment history from October 2007 to present day is fair game and is considered eligible. If you were working in public service from 1995 and were paying on your loan since then as well, unfortunately, everything from 1995 to October 2007 is irrelevant for the purposes of this program. All right, so again, it started October 2007, so that's really the sort of the start date as far as eligible employment and payment history goes. And essentially the program works like this. You are able to have the remainder of your loan balance forgiven, tax-free, okay? So there are no tax implications there. After you have made 120 qualifying payments. Now, if you could see me right now, I'm doing qualifying payments in air quotes because the devil is really in the details as to what constitutes a qualifying payment, all right? But essentially you need to make 120 of them total. So it really comes down to three main things, and we're going to walk through those in a second here. But I want to first clarify some of the common misconceptions that people have about these 120 qualifying payments. All right. Number one is that they do not need to be consecutive. They just need to be cumulative. So you just need to reach 120 total cumulative qualifying payments. All right. So let's say you worked in a qualifying employer for 2 years and received 24 qualifying payment credits, and then decided to go work in the private sector for a little bit. Nothing happens to those 24 credits. They simply pause. You pause resuming any or accumulating any further credits because you're no longer working for a qualifying employer. But if you were to come back into the public sector at any point, you could resume accumulating those credits. All right. So you just need to get to 120 total. Now, the other thing about these 120 payments is that you can only receive one qualifying payment credit per one payment per 1 month, meaning you can't double up on payments in a month and get 2 qualifying or more credits for that month. In any given calendar year of 12 months, the maximum amount of PSLF credits that you can receive is 12, okay? 1 for each month. So if you've got to get to 120, right? You guys can do the math, 12 credits max a year, that's 10 years, right? At the earliest to achieve forgiveness under this program. So there's no way that you can achieve forgiveness any earlier than 10 years. And that would be if you were making consecutive payments, which you don't need to, all right? So again, it's about getting to this 120 qualifying payments total. All right, on the next slide, I'm going to sort of start to break down some of these eligibility requirements in more detail. So the big one that everyone needs to be aware of is that you need to work for a qualifying employer. Now, this can either be a 501c3 nonprofit. So those include charitable organizations, nonprofit healthcare facilities, a lot of nonprofit private schools, legal aid services, a lot of healthcare and higher education institutions are all nonprofits. So there are probably about 25 million borrowers out there right now, or I should say 25% of all student loan borrowers out there work for a qualifying employer in capacity. So a lot more than many people are aware. So you can either work for a 501c3 nonprofit or any type of government entity, federal, state, local, or tribal. So that includes public safety, like firefighters, police, first responders, public health, nurses, staff, other healthcare professionals, and public education, teachers, faculty, staff, what have you. Or like I said, any government employee, okay? It doesn't matter in what capacity you are employed. You could be janitorial, administrative, teaching faculty, surgeon, nurse, does not matter at all. It just matters what is on your W-2. If you are employed by that entity, that is all that matters. All right, so that's sort of the breakdown of qualifying employers. On the next slide, I'm now going to sort of walk you through how to better understand your eligibility for the program based on some of the more technical requirements around things like your loan type and repayment plan. So this is sort of a basic, I would say, overview of the questions you're going to want to ask yourself in determining that eligibility. So first and foremost, we want to understand what loans you have. in order to make sure that you have direct loans, because those are the loans that qualify for the program. So, first and foremost, you want to, understand, are you paying back on direct federal loans? Okay. The next question you want to be asking yourself is, does your employer qualify, right? And if you're unsure if your employer qualifies, we're going to show you a little bit later on in the presentation how the Savvy tool is designed to be able to basically help you to figure that out. And we have a database of all of the eligible employers in the country. So you're able to find out that way. Are you enrolled in a qualifying repayment plan? Okay, that's the next question. So are you paying that loan on an income-driven repayment plan? And then if so, if those are all yes to all those questions, then the next step you want to take is by documenting your eligibility through what's called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Employment Certification Form. This is the one form only for the program. It's the form you submit to basically get started tracking towards forgiveness. It's the form you submit at the very end, and it gets signed by you, the borrower, and then it gets signed off by your HR or employer, any current or previous employment you might have had. And that is the only way in which you can essentially submit documentation necessary to achieve forgiveness. All right, moving on to the next slide. Great. So I wanted to touch on how some of the pandemic relief has impacted a program like public service loan forgiveness. So we'll start with the payment pause. So obviously payments have been paused and interest has been waived for the majority of federal student loans out there since March of 2020. Okay, so that basically means that for a little over 2 years or so, right, borrowers have not had to make payments. And obviously that payment pause has been extended through August 31st of this year. Now, what is a great opportunity or a huge opportunity for any borrower that has been working in a public service capacity over the course of those 2 years is that for each month that payments have been paused, which is from March of 2020 through August 31st of this year, will be 30 months total. For each of those 30 months, if you've been working full-time for a qualifying employer, you are eligible to receive 30 free PSLF credits towards the 120 total that you need. So you essentially, for not having to have made a payment at all, are able to receive a qualifying payment credit as if you did. And in fact, not just one, but 30, one for each of the months that payments were paused. So this is going to put people a heck of a lot closer towards that 120 without having to have paid a dime. And that's really significant because under the normal, program eligibility requirements, you need to be making payments in order to accumulate a qualifying payment credit. So this is a big deal. And I find many borrowers are perhaps misinformed about this, or actually have opted to continue making payments because they thought they needed to, when in fact they didn't. And if you voluntarily made a payment during the payment pause, you can actually have that refunded to you. It's a very simple process. Right. So we're going to show you a little bit later on, like I said, the Savvy tool and how it's designed to help borrowers get through the PSLF process, essentially help monitor and manage all of the administrative applications, all of those employment certification forms. So we'll show that to you a little bit later on in the presentation. All right, we've got a few more slides to get through here around public service loan forgiveness. So I'm going to try to go through these here quickly because I know we are close on time. So let's first talk about what to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And we're going to sort of break it down in these three categories of loan type, repayment plan, and employer. So when it comes to loans, okay, direct federal loans qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And they can come in a variety of different forms. You can be direct subsidized or unsubsidized, direct graduate plus loans, direct parent plus loans, and direct consolidation loans. That's the term for when a loan has been consolidated into a direct loan, right? So all of those, if you see the word direct next to your loan title on your account, you're in good shape. When it comes to repayment plans, under the original rules of this program, both income-driven repayment plans as well as the 10-year standard repayment plan were eligible and qualified for the program. And last but not least, while you had a direct loan and were repaying that loan on one of those repayment plans, you obviously needed to be working for a qualifying employer. Again, that's government organizations at any level, federal, state, local, or tribal, or any 501c3 nonprofit. That's what does qualify. Let's go on to the next slide to talk about what does not qualify. All right, so what does not qualify, and I will say this now, this is, these are the original rules of the program. This does not sort of take into account the limited waiver, which was announced last fall and sort of expanded the eligibility here. So I want to make sure that that is clear to everyone. This was sort of the original rules. So when it comes to loans, FFEL loans, Perkin loans, loans in default, and private student loans didn't qualify. Repayment plans, extended, graduated, and any months in which you were in deferment, forbearance, or default, okay, did not count. And then a couple examples of some employers that don't qualify: government contractors, labor unions, 501c4 nonprofits and political groups, and religious instruction. All right, so those are examples of things that didn't qualify. All right, now on to the next slide. Great, so I want to briefly touch on how the introduction of what they're calling the Pslf limited waiver, this was back in October of last year, has sort of overhauled some of these requirements and expanded the eligibility to allow more borrowers to now be eligible and maximize their potential forgiveness benefit. So when it comes to, and we're going to break this down in the same categories: loan type, repayment plan, and employer. So when it comes to loan types, okay, obviously you still need to have a direct loan, but they are basically counting periods in which you might not have had a direct loan. Let's say you had a FFEL loan. If you had a FFEL loan and were making payments on that loan anywhere from October 2007 to present day, those are now eligible to count as qualifying payment credits. You still need to consolidate, but you're able to count those payments towards that 120. When it comes to repayment plan, basically there is no specific repayment plan that you needed to be on. You could have been on any type of repayment plan, and they are going to count that as a qualifying payment credit. So like I said, whereas before you were limited to income-driven repayment plans, now, and again, this is just retroactive. It's not referring to going forward in the program. It basically means that if at any point you were on a different type of repayment plan, you're probably able to be to count that now towards the 120 qualifying payment credits. And last but not least, as far as employer goes, not much has changed here. I would say you are actually now able to be retired or no longer working at the time you were actually applying for public service loan forgiveness. This was not the case, before this waiver went into effect. So something for borrowers to be aware of. But otherwise, as far as employment, this has remained relatively the same. I would also note that borrowers who have received teacher loan forgiveness are able to now use that period of time towards public service loan forgiveness as well. So you can qualify for both programs for the same periods of time. All right, moving on. So we're going to try to walk you through a couple of questions here that are going to help you to sort of further determine what your next steps and actions should be. All right, and this is going to sort of be based on various aspects of your eligibility. So we're going to start with your loans, your loan type specifically. So let's say you don't know what kind of loans you have. All right. Well, the first thing that you need to do is find out what kind of loans you have. So you can do that by going to studentaid.gov, logging into your FSA account, going to the My Aid page, scrolling down, and there's a loan breakdown section. You're looking for the word direct or DL. That's going to indicate it's direct. It's going to say FFEL, FFEL, or FFELP if it's a FFEL loan, and Perkins if it is a Perkins loans. Okay, so you should find that list of each of your federal loans you've borrowed, and it will indicate what type of loan they are. All right, so now on to the next slide. You've determined what type of loans you have. And let's say you have at least one federal loan that is not a direct loan, okay? All right, so what you're gonna need to do if that's the case is you are going to need to consolidate that non-direct loan, okay, into a direct loan. And then you're going to need to submit the PSLF forms, those employment certification forms, before October 31st of this year, okay? In order to ensure that any payments made while you had that FFEL loan are able to count, okay? If you didn't or don't do that before October 31st of the year, you won't be able to receive those credits towards the 120 in forgiveness. The eligibility requirements will go back to what they were before after October 31st, and you will no longer be able to take advantage. So it's really important, and such a great thing that you are all attending this now, that anyone who has any inclination around this program, whether you were rejected before, actually, in fact, especially if you were rejected before, this is exactly what this waiver was designed for. People like you, there's a very strong chance that you are now going to be accepted and that you're going to be able to count all those years of payment and employment. But even if you've never submitted anything before, it is in your best interest to make sure you take that action before the waiver deadline on October 31st. That's the only way you can take advantage of the waiver and maximize your forgiveness eligibility. All right. You can check your employer's eligibility using the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov/PSLF. That has a list of all the qualifying employers, as does the Savvy tool we're going to show you a little bit later on. All right, on to the next one. So that's if you have at least one loan that is not a direct loan. Let's say you have direct loans and some of your employment certified. So you've submitted an employment certification form at some point, which is great. So if you've already applied for PSLF and submitted that, okay, your loans should have moved to Fed loan at some point in this process. And any additional credits that you might be eligible for should have been awarded and added to your account automatically. All right. So you should have received communication around this happening. It started back last fall. It's continuing to happen into this past spring, but that should have been done automatically. So you want to make sure you look out for an email from FSA letting you know how many additional payments they've determined you're eligible for, but largely you don't need to do anything if you've already submitted that employment certification. Okay, on to the next one. Let's say you have direct loans, but haven't submitted anything ever. That's totally okay, so long as you do submit something before October 31st. So what you're going to want to do is submit that PSLF form or the employment certification form, okay, one and the same. And that way, and again, I should clarify, you're going to want to submit it for any current and previous employment you might have had, all right, because this is retroactive. So let's say you've worked at 3 or 4 different qualifying employers over the course of your career, at least from 2007 to present. You will need to submit for employment certification forms, okay? So each employer gets its own certification form and sign off, right? And one thing to just keep in mind here is that as of July 1, the PSLF program is now managed not by FedLoan, but by MOHELA, MOHELA, okay? Managed by MOHELA, meaning now all forms and paperwork need to be submitted to MOHELA, and any borrowers who are looking to track towards PSLF forgiveness and apply for the program, if they are currently with another servicer, their loans, once they've submitted these forms, will actually transition to MOHELA. So in about a couple of months, everyone who was with FedLoan is going to be transitioned over to MOHELA, and any new borrowers coming into the program are all going to be moved to MOHELA. All right, so that is the new sort of manager of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, and everything needs to be submitted there. And expect if your loans aren't there already, expect them to move once you've submitted those forms. All right, last but not least here, let's say you tried to certify some employment, but were denied or rejected, okay? So if, let's say the Department of Education previously said your employer was not eligible for PSLF, I highly encourage you to submit a new form and see if you are able to now receive credit towards forgiveness, okay? So that's that. You can find out which employers the department has already deemed eligible through the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov, all right? And like we said, there's ultimately not too many updates affecting the qualifying employer rules. You still need to be, largely 501c3 nonprofit, or a designated government entity. But I know that there are plans in the works and proposals to expand the employer eligibility in the future. So, if your employer doesn't count now, but you work in a public service capacity, but it's just because your employer happens to be a private entity, right? That very, very well might be changing in the coming months. And obviously the student debt crisis team will keep you updated as to anything that happens. All right, let's keep rolling through here. We're going to sort of transition a little bit to talk about a tricky topic, but something that is important for many borrowers, and any borrower who does not have a direct loan at the moment, is consolidation. Okay. And when we say consolidation, it's complicated. It's because not only is it complicated, but under this limited waiver, the rules around consolidation have completely changed. Okay. Leading up to this waiver, consolidation was something that I would constantly warn borrowers about, because of the fact that it would essentially reset your loans when consolidated. And a lot of borrowers had accidentally consolidated without knowing what the consequences were. Basically were forced to start back at zero as far as their qualifying payment credits go, when that shouldn't have been the case. Now, under this waiver, if we can go on to the next slide, Ian, under this waiver, not only are borrowers able to benefit from consolidation, but in order to become eligible for this waiver and take advantage and receive these additional credits, you need to consolidate any non-direct loan that you have. All right. You won't be able to, if you still have a FFEL loan or a Parent Plus loan or a Perkins loan, you've not consolidated that loan, you won't be able to take advantage of these expanded eligibility. Regardless of how eligible you might be otherwise, you still need to consolidate that loan into a direct loan. Okay. So on this next slide, I'm just going to sort of walk through what exactly consolidation is. If we can go to that next slide, Ian, and why you might consolidate. So a few different reasons. If you have multiple student loans, you may be able to combine them into one loan with a fixed interest rate, but it's essentially a weighted average of those interest rates. And this is essentially what consolidation does. Okay. It creates a new direct consolidation loan. All right. It's not necessarily lowering that interest rate like a refinancing would, right? But it's a free federal process by which you are creating that new direct consolidation loan. Okay. This direct consolidation loan, like I said, allows you to consolidate multiple federal education loans into one loan, right? Doesn't check your credit or anything like that. There's nothing to do with credit, so no credit implications there. It is simply a part of the sort of federal administrative process around these loans. Okay. All right. So that is sort of what consolidation is. Let's go on to the next one. Now, why would you need to consolidate? And this is very, very important because many borrowers were encouraged to consolidate by their servicer, or heard about consolidation or did it for for ease. Maybe they had a lot of different loans and just wanted to be able to make one payment, not have different servicers, but without really knowing what the implications were. There are a couple of reasons why you'd want to consolidate. First and foremost is to make your loan type eligible for federal programs. All right. So if you have a FFEL loan, FFEL loan, right, you need to consolidate that loan in order to become eligible for public service loan forgiveness. Okay. If you have a Parent Plus loan, you need to consolidate that loan in order to make that loan eligible for income-driven repayment, as well as public service loan forgiveness. All right. So it's going to impact your eligibility, just not beyond beyond the forgiveness program itself, but for many of you, it will open up more repayment options as well and make you eligible for a broader range of income-driven repayment. So that is consolidating because of your loan type. You need to in order to become eligible. Another reason to consolidate is to get out of default, sort of a get out of jail free card, one time only. Okay. If you ever go into default, you can immediately bring your loans back into good standing by consolidating them. Essentially creates a brand new loan, brings them into good standing. But again, you can only do it once. All right. All right. You need to consolidate to include retroactive Parent Plus loans with other loans. So if you have a parent with Parent Plus loans, and you also have other loans that were taken out by you for you, okay? So those are from when you were a student. if you consolidate them together under this waiver, they're going to take the credit count of the older loans. And I know this is sort of getting into the weeds a little bit here, but anyone with Parent Plus loans and older loans of their own is highly encouraged under this waiver to consolidate everything together. It will benefit your Parent Plus loans and basically make them part of your older loans so that you can receive forgiveness faster. You'd want to consolidate to combine undergrad and graduate loans, again, to be forgiven faster. You'd want to consolidate in order to retroactively claim credits for forgiveness under this waiver, right? So that's part of the requirements for the PSLF limited waiver. And as far as triggering a PSLF limited waiver account review, after you consolidate, what's going to trigger that review is actually the submitting the PSLF form, that employment certification form. So it's for those borrowers who need to consolidate, it's two things: consolidating and then submitting the PSLF forms for any current or previous employer. That's what's going to trigger the review. All right, last but not least here, I think hopefully we're winding up on some of these forgiveness programs. If we can go to the next slide. So loan types that need to be consolidated in order to become eligible for public service loan forgiveness. So again, that is Parent Plus loans and FFEL loans. Under the PSLF waiver, again, you must consolidate before October 31st. Now, for FFEL loans, you are going to be able to get credit for payments made prior to that consolidation. Unfortunately, Parent Plus loans were not included in the limited waiver. And so, yes, you will still need to consolidate in order to become eligible, but unfortunately, you're going to have to start back at zero. Or basically, I should say, you'll only be able to start accumulating credits after the point of consolidation. All right, so moving on to the next one. Just wanted to quickly capture some of the career-specific loan forgiveness programs that are out there. Programs for healthcare professionals, so nurses, pharmacists, physicians, things like that. And there's also teacher loan forgiveness, which is for full-time, highly qualified teachers who are teaching at a Title I or low-income school or education agency. It's a range of either $5,000 or a max of $17,500. You essentially have to teach 5 consecutive years at a Title I school. So Ian's going to show you in a little bit the Savvy tool, and we actually have teacher loan forgiveness built into that database as well. So if you are a public school teacher out there, you'll be able to see your eligibility for that program as well. All right, moving on to the next slide here. Just wanted to quickly sort of run through some of the other forgiveness and discharge options out there. So things like total and permanent disability discharge, closed school discharge, defense to repayment, fake certification of eligibility, death discharge, and unpaid refund. We don't have time to go into these in more detail now, so I encourage you to look them up if you are curious and interested. But these are other ways of having your loans forgiven or discharged. All right, so to wrap things up here, I know that was a lot and we are nearing the end, but I'm going to sort of walk through this loan forgiveness checklist here so you can make sure that everyone is on the same page as far as what the next steps look like. So first, you want to confirm you have a qualifying loan type, a direct loan, right? And if you don't have a direct loan, let's say you have a FFEL loan, you're going to need to consolidate that loan first and foremost, okay? You're also going to want to make sure that you enroll in a qualifying repayment plan for when payments do eventually resume or are scheduled to resume starting in September. Okay. And then you're going to want to make sure that you verify your employer qualifications, and you do that by submitting those PSLF employment certification forms. Okay. Again, it's one form and one form only for the program for any current and previous employment. All right. And, it's going to take a bit of time for the servicers to review these. So I would say expect delays, but continue to monitor, any communications that you're receiving from your servicer closely. All right. On to the next one, Ian, please. Great. So just a few quick FAQs around public service loan forgiveness. Can you double up on payments and earn more credits per month? So I actually touched on this earlier in the presentation, but no, right? You must make 120 payments and you can only receive one qualifying payment credit per one payment per 1 month, all right? How do I check how many PSLF credits I have? So the way that you can check is by submitting the PSLF employment certification form. That essentially acts as the trigger for any type of review and or sort of tracking towards the program. All right. Last but not least, if I've been working in public service and I'm just finding out about this program, can those years count? Well, it's going to depend upon, other factors around your eligibility, like, were you making payments and what type of loans you had? But absolutely, if you've been working in public service in a full-time capacity for a while, you can apply to certify any employment, like we said, from October 2007 to present day. All right. So I know we are running short on time here. Cody, I'm not sure if we want to keep charging through or take any questions at this point. I defer to you.
Yeah, let's just address a couple of I think, like broad questions that I think will be really relevant to folks, and then we can push through here. Just some things that I think came up over and over again. I think a lot of people, Lindsay, asked about how they can find out if their employer qualifies. And so what is your recommendation for someone if they don't know if their employer is a qualifying PSLF employer?
Yeah, well, I mean, Ian's going to show you in just a few minutes here, how you can utilize the Savvy tool to do that by simply typing in the name of your employer. It will pop up things that are close to it, right, to be able to hopefully identify the right employer that is eligible. I would say you can also use the PSLF help tool at studentaid.gov. However, it's a bit more cumbersome, and you will need to have the FEIN number of your employer handy. All right. You can also look at the IRS website, which usually has a database that you can either export but search within of nonprofit employers. Or if still in doubt, or having issues, you can consult anyone from HR at your institution and see if they can give you an answer.
Cool. I'm just going to address another question that came up several times, which is, do you have to be working full time? And also, a lot of people asked in today's workshop, is there a minimum amount of time you have to be working at an employer? And so just to address those two questions, one, you do need to be working full time for your employer to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So I saw some folks in here who were volunteers with nonprofits, others who worked many part-time jobs. It's that full-time employment status that really matters here. And on the other side of that was the question about how long you should be working at your employer. The good thing about public service loan forgiveness is that it is cumulative, not consecutive. So you can combine all of the different months and years you worked for a qualifying employer and made payments towards your 120 monthly payments. So you don't have to work 10 years at one employer to qualify. It can all be put together, and that's a really important detail for folks. Okay, just a few more questions here, and we can keep going, and we'll address some more at the end here. Lindsay, what is your advice for people who are talking to their servicer or logging in online and they don't think their payment count is accurate? I saw that come up at least a dozen times already.
Yeah, so I'm assuming this question is referring to non-Fed loan servicers, right? Or is it referring to Fed loan?
It seemed like a mix of both. A lot of folks seem to be telling us that they're getting some payments counted towards public service loan forgiveness, but there's a chunk missing and they don't know what their next step should be. Got it.
Yep. So yes, when you, especially if you have a Fed loan account now and submitted those forms, or you had one, you've already been transferred potentially to Mohila, but really when you're looking at those sort of results of the qualifying payments, they sort of break it down into eligible periods of time and qualifying. Okay. And so what you might see is that you've been awarded a certain number of qualifying payment credits. And then there's, periods of time in which you have eligible credits, basically, which have not been certified yet, but that basically would be eligible to be certified based on the fact that you've been working for a qualifying employer and were making payments. But generally, what keeps borrowers from having those counted and turned into actual qualifying payment credits is simply the fact that they have not submitted employment certification forms for their complete employment history. So if you submitted that employment certification form for your current employer 6 years ago, okay, that is certifying your employment up through 6 years ago. If you haven't submitted one since, then the period from 6 years ago to present day has not technically been certified as you working for a qualifying employer. So you're not going to, even though you've been making payments, right? It's not going to show up as a qualifying payment credit until they have a employment certification form in their hand with the dates matching, those dates. All right. So I found many borrowers, when they have chunks or periods of time that are missing or that they haven't gotten credit for, it's simply because of sort of administrative submission timing around these employment certification forms. So you'll simply need to submit another one of those forms and have that HR sign off. And usually it'll be for the whole period of time you were employed. Submit that again, and it should be updated. However, if you're still struggling and you're not able to get a resolution and working with your servicer, I highly recommend reaching out to the Ombudsman and submitting an Ombudsman complaint. This has been probably one of the most effective ways for borrowers to escalate their situation and actually get it addressed and resolved. We might have a slide on that a little bit later on, but I know the SDCC team has sort of details as far as how to contact the Ombudsman, but there's a federal submission form that's pretty easy to fill out that I encourage anyone who's having any issues regarding anything, not just PSLF, to take advantage of. So sorry that was long-winded, Cody.
No worries. All right, let's jump into the next section here so we can get to the PSLF, the Savvy tool related to PSLF, which is after this section. And I know we're short on time. So I'm going to just quickly cover federal loan repayment programs. The big thing here in this section is for you all to recognize that there are affordable repayment programs that are available that can be coupled with public service loan forgiveness to make sure that you're actually maximizing the benefits that you can receive under the program. So let's go to the next slide here. So a borrower that finishes their program or leaves school will be put into a grace period for about 6 months where they don't have payments. And if they do nothing, they're going to be put into the 10-year standard repayment plan. That means every month you make the same student loan payment amount. And at the end of 10 years, your student loans will be paid off entirely. That is increasingly impossible for many borrowers because of the sheer size of these student loan payments. So next slide, please. What exists out there for folks like me and like many of you who can't afford a super high student loan payment is that you can apply for a federal income-driven repayment plan. And an income-driven repayment plan adjusts your monthly payments so that they're more affordable because it's tied to your income and your family size, not your student loan, not the amount of student loans that you owe. Next slide. So here's the key thing, the combined benefits. You can enroll in an income-driven repayment plan at any time, and you can apply for public service loan forgiveness at any time. So the ideal scenario for a borrower is to be enrolled in the lowest monthly payment possible while making qualifying payments towards public service loan forgiveness. So at the end of 10 years, you will have received student loan forgiveness and you would have paid as little into those loans as possible through one of these programs. Next slide, please. So who benefits from IDR? Borrowers with consistently low incomes. These programs are for people who cannot afford their student loans, and not that they just can't afford it this week, people who just have lower incomes and they don't foresee themselves being able to afford their student loans. If you lost your job, have decreased hours, or have been impacted by the COVID pandemic, also great option for you. If you want to just lower your monthly payments for a year, if right now you're making less and you want to lock in a lower monthly payment right now, you can apply. And borrowers that were excluded from COVID relief. If you were one of those people who has an FFEL loan or a Perkins loan and never received pandemic relief, you can enroll in an IDR program and have a lower monthly payment. So here's a quick rundown of the repayment plans. Again, I'm not going to jump into the details of each specific program, but I want to list them for you. They're called revised pay-as-you-earn, income-based repayment, income-based repayment, new income-based repayment, and income contingent repayment. And on the left-hand side here, we have the most generous, newer programs. And on the right-hand side, where we have income contingent repayment, those are older programs that are less generous. Next slide. So here's an example. I think it's helpful to see this kind of in action. So a borrower under the 10-year standard plan, if they're single, have one child, and make and have student debt that's $37,000 total, they'll be paying $364 a month. That's about an average student loan payment. If they're enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan and they make no money, they're unemployed, their student loan payment could be as little as $0. If they made $25,000 per year, their payment would be $49. And you can see at $50,000 and $75,000 of income, this borrower is still getting a lower monthly payment. So you can see a borrower could pay as little as $0 per month and still be on time, making what is considered an on-time payment and current on their student loans. So how do you enroll in one of these programs? Well, you submit an application. You can submit an application at the Department of Education's website through your loan servicer or the Savvy tool that we're going to talk about right after this section. After you submit an application, it takes about 30 days typically to get you into the plan, and you'll get an announcement saying, or an update saying that you're now in an income-driven repayment plan. Once you do, it's really important to note when your repayment plan will expire. So when you apply for an IDR plan, you are locked in for 12 months. And we tell people to put it on their calendar to recertify their income, essentially reapplying the next year, because if you miss recertification, you can have your student loan payment that month increase to the standard repayment plan. You can have interest capitalized, meaning interest that accrued during that year that you had lower monthly payments are added to your balance. Long story short, put it on your calendar so you recertify within the next 12-month period. Now, the best part about an IDR program is you can receive loan forgiveness even if you didn't qualify for any of these other loan forgiveness programs we talked about, if you complete one of these programs. And the way an IDR program works is you have to stay in it for 20 or 25 years, depending on which program it is that you're enrolled in. And after that, you are entitled to have your remaining debt forgiven. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned this earlier, but there were many borrowers who were pushed into long-term forbearances where income-driven repayment plan would have been more beneficial. And what that also meant is that people who should have had 20 years of payment under one of these programs didn't, because they were told by their servicer to enroll in one of these other programs. This new fix by the Department of Education is designed to make that time in long-term forbearance count towards your 20 or 25 years. The new IDR fixes are going to be automatic. They're going to happen later this year. And so many borrowers may find that their loans are erased automatically because they now hit this 20 or 25 year period. Next slide, please. So here's your quick FAQs. What should you do if your income or your family size changes before your recertification deadline? The great news about an IDR program is that you can recertify your income anytime. So if you're impacted by losing your job or loss of pay, you can recertify right now and lock in a lower monthly payment for the next year. Will you have to pay taxes on debt forgiveness? Unfortunately, under the IDR program, you would pay taxes. The good news is that Congress passed recently, over the last year or so, a law that prohibits taxation of forgiven debt for the next 5 years. So at least for now, If you have your student loans forgiven under an IDR program, you will not be taxed, but after that 5-year moratorium, you will. And a lot of people don't have a traditional like PACE or a traditional W-2 for which to document their income for one of these programs. There's other ways you can do it. There's pay stubs, proof of income, and other methods. And the folks at Savvy can actually help you through that process if needed as well. Debt relief scams are out there. I just want to flag this for folks. If you're interested in one of these repayment programs, you probably have heard from a company that says that they're going to offer you immediate loan forgiveness or rush you into applying through their business. Debt relief scams are out there and they're not real. In fact, our own research showed that some borrowers pay $600 for help enrolling in these programs. You can go to the Department of Education, you can go to your student loan servicer, or you can work with Student Debt Crisis Center and Savvy, who are helping borrowers for free. And you don't ever need to reach out to one of these scams that charge astronomical amounts, $600,000, $1,000 to do this paperwork for you. And if you have issues or complaints, contact the Student Loan Ombudsman's office. The Department of Education Ombudsman's office can actually resolve disputes you have with your servicer and can help you find the information you need about your account. You can see here there's an email, FSA Ombudsman Office at ed.gov. And you can contact this office for help with your student loans if you think there's been an error or you need help resolving an issue with your student loan servicing company. So here's your checklist. Learn about your repayment plans and find out what works best for you. You can go to the tool by Savvy, and there's a text there at the bottom. It's app.bysavvy.com/register/borrowers. Or you can go to the Department of Education's tool. There are ways to find out which program works best for you. Once you know about the program, submit your IDR application online and then put it on your calendar so you recertify next year to stay in the program. All right, with that, I'm going to pass off to Ian. We've been hinting at it all night. There is this tool by Savvy that can help with all of this, and Ian's going to tell you all about it.
All right, thanks for having me on tonight. And thank you all for staying even 15 minutes after our scheduled time here. I know student loans are not fun to talk about by any means, no matter what time of day it is. So thanks for joining and staying late. There's a lot to have taken in an hour. A lot of rules, regulations, policy changes, continuing policy changes that are always up in the air, it seems, and hard to keep track of. So it's always good to have kind of a resource on your side. When your car breaks down, you can go to the mechanic. When you need help with appliances, you have a repairman. And when you need help with student loans and answering questions, Savvy can be here as well to assist and answer with that. Your full-time jobs are working in public sector roles and being able to serve and keep our country open, safe, healthy, and educated. Not in understanding federal bureaucracy of student loan debt and why Congress decided to make rules in 2007 that they did. And that's where we can help. So we as a company have an online tool that is really intuitive and innovative to walk through one-on-one and be able to answer all these questions. So being able to ask, am I eligible? Am I working at the right employer? Do I have the right loan types? Do I need to consolidate? Should I apply every year? Do I have to wait until I have 120 credits? All of these questions that you all have been asking all night, this will help answer and guide you through that whole process individually, rather than having to read articles and articles and join even webinars and wait hours for answers. This is a way to help get through it on your own. So as a company, we built this tool. We're a team of student loan borrowers ourselves and have been advocating for policies to be better and be changed alongside, even folks like Cobia at Student Debt Crisis Center for decades here. So we are on your side and want to be able to offer this resource as a way to give back to student loan borrowers, knowing that this is such a confusing and horrible federal system to be having to deal with on your own. It can feel really daunting taking on the federal government by yourself, and I'm sure that's how many of us are feeling. So with the Savvy tool online, that's 100% free to you, funded, by grants and work like that. So it's not anything that we're collecting or selling data or anything that will ever be charged for. It's 100% free, always for you, safe and secure. You'll be able to answer a couple questions, check your eligibility for loan forgiveness, see what your best options are going forward. So to give you a map that will say, here's the plan you can enroll in, here's how many years until forgiveness, here's what that exact dollar amount looks like. And answers all these questions that are really up in the air and in the gray area normally. You even have the opportunity to sign and submit your paperwork digitally. So traditionally, you would have to download, fill them out, ink, pen, and paper, mail, and fax them in, and just hope, with the luck of God that they got there 3 months later and that you heard back. That is not the case. It is send them all digitally right away, and you'll be able to track the whole progress of where they're at. If they're waiting for your signature, if they're waiting for your employer to sign and say, yep, they worked here, they were great, and we're gonna, sign this off. If it's waiting for, the Department of Ed to review them, you'll always know and always have the answer right at your fingertips there. So if this is something that you're interested in, think, wow, maybe this could be helpful. Maybe let me run my numbers, for free. It takes 15 minutes just to run through and see, is this something I'm eligible for? What do I need to do? What are my next steps to take? I'd recommend everyone at least log in and make an account and check that out. And you can do so at the link in the chat. Cody and Lindsay will put that link in the chat. So please be sure to bookmark it to save that and come back to later if you're unable to follow along now, since I know we are a little over time. But once you get logged in, you'll land at your student loan dashboard. So I'm going to run through just a couple of screenshots so there's no surprises once you get into the online website. Because I know it can be daunting, looking and trying to figure out where everything is at. So once you get into the online website here, you'll fill out that questionnaire here, that general information that, asks things like, how much money do you make? How many children do you have? And all of these questions are designed to save you money every single month because they can rack up savings opportunities on income-driven repayment programs. You're also able to, submit all these employers that would, need to count and qualify for loan forgiveness all the way back to 2007. So we can help you get your house in order retroactively to 2007, and then make sure that we're set up for success going forward. We talked about a lot of policies changing, and that's why they've changed. The Department of Ed has recognized that it's been kind of a mess, for over a decade, and that they need to clean things up a little bit. And so the new administration has done that, recognized that, and taken action. So that's what this 12 months period of time is, from last October to this upcoming October, is an opportunity for them to say, we're sorry that this has been kind of, unorganized, to say the least. Let's get it fixed up. Let's give you the progress you deserve. And let's make sure we're set up for success going forward. And that's our goal at Savvy as well. It's to get as many people through this 1 year progress right now as possible while we can with these new rules. So you'll see even on this, answering a couple questions, it took just a couple minutes to get to this third step. We put in our employers. There's 1.7 million employers in our database. So people asking, does this qualify? Does that qualify? Is religious instruction allowed? It's a 501c4. Does that count? If you type it in, it will tell you. It'll say yes, no, back and forth for that. I would put every single employer since 2007 in. You might be surprised on what counts or what doesn't. For example, they say private universities, but those private universities that really like to say they're private are, 501c3s in actuality, and get that, that tax break as well there. So in this example, on this slide, you can see we worked at public organizations for over 10 years. That means under these rules, it is so super likely that you will get immediate forgiveness. And we're ready to help you file the paper and do all of that and get it squared away before October, when this liberal rule expires. The last piece of this puzzle piece, right, of public service loan forgiveness, we put the public service piece in by putting our employers in it. Now we need to put the loan piece in. That's the second puzzle piece to put together. And you're able to add your loans here. This does not transfer your loans. It does not take, Savvy doesn't take ownership over any of your loans. What we get is a safe, secure view, read-only snapshot. So we get to, see what is going on. We get a little insight, but we don't take them over. They don't get transferred. This is not refinancing, anything like that. It is just a safe view only snapshot. And that's how we're able to say, what's the interest rate? How many payments have we made? Which ones qualify? Which ones has the Department of Ed counted that should be counted even more? Things like that to find those discrepancies in your accounts. So that's how we do that, is being able to get that inside, view of what's going on with your student loans. Once we get all that information, again, in under 15 minutes for most people, it takes to plug this all in really quickly. This is where you're able to see what these numbers are. Nowhere else on the internet can you see all of these answers in one spot, right? So in this example, we're saving $217 a month. Over the time of repayment, that's going to save us $12,000. This is going to be the total amount we pay. We have 6 years until forgiveness, and that's going to be $15,000. In actuality, most borrowers right now that are getting forgiveness are closer to $50,000 or $60,000, right? So this is a little bit outdated of a screenshot, I'll admit to you. So most people's totals are much higher. It's life-changing savings. It's paying for college kids, or kids' colleges, down payments on homes, retirement savings, big chunk of change back to you by being able to forgive these loans and do it successfully to get across that finish line. So at that point, you're able to choose and continue and keep going and file all that paperwork digitally. Say, here's where I worked, for 15 years, for 10 years, and do all of that. Or there's also an opportunity to hit contact support and get in touch if necessary there. There's over 100 Help Center articles that we've written together that are written in plain language that are super understandable. And you're able to have kind of a one-on-one chat if necessary with our support team to be able to work out any discrepancies that might arise. But I know that's a lot of information at you again really quickly. I think the long story short is that there are resources available beyond webinars and listening for hours and reading articles and talking to folks on chat forums. There are actual tangible tools that will help you submit and file and get all the way across that finish line. And we're really excited to be able to share that with you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ian. I know we are definitely over time, so I'm just going to address a few, again, like broad questions that I think are really helpful to folks. And I'm just going to remind everyone, you will get an email 24 hours from today that has the video link, that has the link to Savvy's tool. So you'll be able to watch this again. You'll be able to connect with the tool if you didn't get to see it today, or possibly maybe you're on the phone and you didn't obviously get the links directly. So stay tuned for that email. You'll get that tomorrow. But before we end today's workshop, let's just check off some of these, I think, broad questions that really, I think, are those kind of umbrella questions that can help answer hundreds of questions today. One of the questions, again, was about public service loan forgiveness, and people are really having trouble understanding what should you do if you have many employers. This particular borrower said they have 6 employers in 6 different states. So Lindsay and Ian, I don't know if you have any experience with someone who needs to get employment forms from folks from all over, time, place, all of that. What's your advice for a borrower that's dealing with this?
Well, Ian, you just talked about it. You want to sort of explain how the Savvy tool can help with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't get every screenshot on the website into the slide deck, obviously, but there is a whole feature there that we just launched that's really cool, and it lets you create tons of those employment certification forms, is what it is called. So like I said, that 1.7 million employers that we have in our database all over the country. So that could be hospitals that cross borders. If you moved around, you're able to put that in. It'll ask you if it's someone that we don't have a existing connection with already. So put in their employment email, right? So if that's hr@stjudesresearch.org, whatever that may be, put that in. And what we do is do all the outreach for you. So it sends, forms saying, hey, we're requesting the signature. and we'll keep following up with them until they submit it on your behalf. And that's where you're able to track and see that, where you have 6 of them that are all outstanding in that example. And you'll be able to see, 1 signed, 2 is signed, we're waiting on the other person. It will show you all of that information in one website again, which is really great.
Great. I want to just remind folks too, the link we put in the chat and we're going to email you is a special link just for our borrowers from SDCC. You need to use that specific link to be able to use the tool and to be able to use it for free per our, free work that we do with Savvy. So again, use that link. I see some folks that have kind of Googled Savvy and are trying to get to the tool in different ways. Our link is the one that you need to use to be able to use this tool for free. All right, just a few more questions here, and then everyone can go enjoy their night. I see that a lot of folks didn't quite understand where an income-driven repayment plan connects to public service loan forgiveness. So I'll just answer this one myself. A borrower said, do I have to be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan to qualify for public service loan forgiveness? Technically, the answer there is no, you don't have to be in an income-driven repayment plan. The standard 10-year repayment plan does qualify for public service loan forgiveness. But in actuality, it doesn't really make sense to do that, because if you pay your student loans under the standard repayment plan, you will have paid them off in 10 years anyways. So you wouldn't really even benefit from public service loan forgiveness. So the real benefit here is to lower your monthly payment through an IDR program and then be able to actually benefit from public service loan forgiveness. And then the other piece I will add there is, what about these other repayment programs that exist that we didn't even really get to talk about today? And those are things like extended repayment and graduated repayment. Those programs used to not qualify towards public service loan forgiveness, but under the waiver, these new temporary rules that we talked about, those periods will count. So that's why it's so important for borrowers to enroll apply for public service loan forgiveness, even if they already applied and got denied. Now, under these new rules that are in place until October 31st, those repayment plans will count. So this waiver has really expanded the pool of people who could qualify for public service loan forgiveness. Okay, I see one more here from Sabrina. What if your employer shuts down? What if you can't contact your employer? Lindsay and Ian, do you deal with that often with borrowers?
Not necessarily often, but it does happen. And there is a process by which you can essentially use your tax records basically, and what the Department of Education can do is essentially go back and verify based on those tax records of your employment that you worked for that institution. And so instead of relying on the certification signed off by the employer, they're able to look back at the employment records. However, you need to submit that request and application, and you can do so through studentaid.gov. Through that Pslf help tool, there is a part of that portal where you can basically submit a request to have that documentation reviewed. So it is possible. It's going to require a little bit, more work and sort of administrative, effort, but it is possible to do that.
Great. All right. We are definitely against the clock here. So I'm going to just leave it at that. Again, use the Savvy tool. You'll get the link from the email that you'll receive. I'll also drop it here in the chat one more time. Use this specific link.
And Cody, I was just saying, I just wanted to mention one thing, but before we signed off, just about Savvy. So as we'd mentioned, this is a completely free tool for the student loan borrowers as part of the SDCC community. And so if you are seeing any type of prompt to pay or a paywall or anything like that, that would be a good indication that for some reason you might have been diverted to a different site. And so Don't be alarmed. You can simply send a message to our support team through your Savvy account. It's in the bottom right-hand corner on the left-hand side, contact support. You'll be able to send them a message, and you can just say, I'm with student debt crisis. How can I, make sure that I'm on the right site? And that goes for anyone with any question as you're going through the process. That's what our support team is there for. So you click contact a support. You can initiate that conversation via message in the tool, and you can even request, if you prefer to hop on the phone and chat that way, you can request to schedule a phone call to work with our team. So just want to make sure everyone was aware that that's the best way if you are having any issues or we didn't get to your question here in the chat. Once you're in your free Savvy account, you can start those conversations from there.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification, Lindsay. Just to underline that, we at SDCC, we're a nonprofit. We do not ever and will not charge borrowers for student loan help. And that is why Savvy is so generous to offer their tool to our supporters for free. So I underline what Lindsay said. If you see anything that wants to charge, just contact Savvy or us. We'll make sure you get the right link and get to the right portal so that you can take advantage of this tool. All right. With that, everyone go enjoy your night. Have a good evening and enjoy the upcoming weekend. And we'll hopefully all talk soon.